There it is.
Okay, John, we're on.
Yeah. Okay. So hello, everybody. Welcome to Friday. I think it's going to be a really interesting session. We have Judy Karlsson. Julie is from Sweden. Phenomenal artist. She's going to be showing us, we looked at her dot card yesterday. She's going to be showing us luminescent colors today. Just as a side note, Julie was instrumental for Daniel Smith bringing Daniel Smith product into Scandinavia. She would show people how to use it, put pans and write the names of the colors on the pans. She was just phenomenal, and so appreciative that she did that. Julie, thank you so very, very much.
You're very kind, John. Thank you.
Julie also showed Anders Anderson, the Daniel Smith brand, and you've all met Anders, another fantastic Swede. So it's fantastic. So I was going to tell you a little bit about the luminescent. The luminescent is 51 colors in the luminescent. It's made up of the iridescent family, and you kind of saw that yesterday. Iridescent are luminescent colors that reflect light. And because they reflect light, you can see them on black and you can see them on white. So the iridescent is a good example of that. The raspberry that you saw yesterday is a very, very good example of that. You can see it on black and also on white. Next, there's the interference. Interference is a refractive pigment, which means it scatters light. And because it scatters light, it's easy to see over black or darks, but very transparent over white. And the next one we have are called the duochromes, and duo because it's one pigment that shifts to two colors. And it is made up of that pigment is both refractive and reflective. So that's why it shifts to two colors. And then the last one, probably everybody watching is very familiar with the last one, is pearlescent. And pearlescent, it's the same pigment in two different colors. One's called pearlescent and the other one's called pearlescent shimmer. And the pearlescent shimmer is the same pigment, it's just a larger particle size versus the pearlescent, which is smaller. If you've seen any of the Lexus, the Toyotas, many of the Chevrolets and the Fords, it has that sparkle in the white. That's pearlescent. It's a very, very pretty color. So with that, Julie's going to show us how to use some of the luminescent colors today. If you're on Zoom, you can ask, Julie's all right if people just ask you questions directly? That would be great. So you can ask Julie questions directly. And if you're on Facebook, hello everybody on Facebook. Anna, myself, Ethel, Giovanni, Gabriel, Johnny will be reading your messages over to Julie. Okay. So with that, Julie, welcome so very, very much. It's always good to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure. My pleasure. I wanted to just take the chance to say hello from all the wonderful Daniel Smith fans here in Sweden. Lots of my painters, lots of my friends. We all love what you're doing. So keep up the good work and thanks for letting us be a part of it.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure. It's our pleasure. So I'm gonna hand it over to you. What would you like to tell the viewers?
Well, for one thing, I think it was kind of a bait and switch this time. I gave you my dot card, which has got the colors that I most often paint with, but that's not what I'm going to be showing you tonight. I'm going to be showing you the luminescent colors. So most of the colors that I'm going to be using are on here. And I have to say, I have to admit, John, I think I must be somebody who comes to conclusions very fast and then finds out she's wrong. Because the first time I saw the luminescent paints, I wasn't sold. I thought, this looks like a hobby project for my kids. And I got a couple of the paints and I thought, my kids are going to have fun with them. But that's not at all what happened. I fell in love with them. There are so many ways to use these luminescent paints. And John, if I understand right, they're mostly pure mineral. Is that right? Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, so the luminescents are synthetic. They're absolutely perfect in the size, shape, and weight. They're either, for the most part, mica and up to 25 layers on a single pigment of mica. And a couple of them, it's really amazing. A couple of them are silica. And that's why you get that unbelievable luminescent.
And iron oxides, is that right too?
No, so you can actually see this, you're correct. In the Primitex, you can see some of this in the fuchsite, the red fuchsite, the green fuchsite, a little bit within the matrix of the kyanite, some within the lapis, and those are all natural. Yes, absolutely. But these right here are from the car industry, so they're all synthetic.
Okay. Okay, one of the things that I think is so cool about these paints is that they shift, like you said. So I did a small paint out, I think you can see, side by side on black paper and on white paper, and they're the same paints next to each other. And you can see how different they are depending on what you're painting on. So here I've done it on black watercolor paper. What I'm going to be doing later is on black watercolor ground. You can also paint over dark colors. For example, if you're using indigo or lamp black or Payne's blue gray and it dries, you can go in with your luminescent paints and they really shimmer and shine and all sorts of fun things show up. So I think it's something that is really fun to explore. You can mix them a lot. I use them at times together with other paints. Here I've used a mix of Monte Amiata, Natural Sienna, Quin Rose, and then Iridescent Sunstone. And I don't think you can see the shimmer. I don't know if I hit it with light in a different direction, maybe. It just glistens ever so lightly there. And it's amazing. It's an amazing mix to use for skin tones because it just gives you that really sun-kissed look without looking like you've put glitter in it. It doesn't look like that. It just has a really nice shimmer, a really nice warmth to it. Sunrise, or kind of a pinkish sky with Naples yellow and duochrome hibiscus, also a really, really nice combination there. I have a few things I've painted with that have really turned out nice. Iridescent electric blue, just straight out of the tube, is my go-to sky. And it looks pretty flat. It doesn't look really shiny and shimmery. It just has this really beautiful atmospheric tone. It looks really nice. And unlike a lot of the other cold blues like cerulean or manganese blue, they're a little bit granulating. This is a lot flatter. So you can get a lot flatter sky, but without it looking flat. It looks like it's an endless sky. You can also use duochrome blue pearl. However, it's got that shimmer. It's actually really, really nice to put in water. If you want just a little bit of sun sparkle on your water at times, that works out really well. Then you can also mix them, just to show you a couple different mixes. I've got hematite genuine, one of the Primitex that is absolutely amazing. It's one of my absolute favorites because of its granulation. Here I used iridescent cherub red, and it's turned into this really, really fun mixture of the two. You see the granulation? It really does some fun things. It'd be a great landscape, I think, using those two. Here I've used Sodalite Genuine and Iridescent Goldstone. Iridescent Goldstone feels slightly granulating too. John, is that correct?
So the iridescent, for the most part, yes, they are granulating.
Okay.
Interference are non-granulating. The iridescent are, for the most part, all granulating.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the iridescent, for the most part, are all granulating.
Okay.
You're correct.
That's good to know. I didn't realize that because this one has got, it just does some really fun things. If I get it closer, can you see?
Yeah.
And then here I did a mix of Sleeping Beauty turquoise, genuine, and duochrome mauve, and I even threw in a little bit of duochrome Arctic fire, which is a really, really fun paint. It shifts so much. Let's see, I've got that here. If you see it on, you can't see it actually on white. It's right here. But if you see it on the black, depending on which way the light hits it, it shifts from green to purple.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that. Can you see the shift?
Yes, I can.
It's such a fun color. It really, really is. So I added that to that combination, and it makes it for a really, really fun shift in that.
Julie, we have the PowerPoint ready for your sample artworks. And perhaps for every artwork, you can just share briefly about the artwork. Can you
Great.
proceed?
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing you. One more time.
We have the PowerPoint ready.
Please, that would be great.
All right, I'm gonna share screen now. Okay, so just making sure that everyone could connect fast and easy. This is Julianne's Instagram account. Just look up by Julianne Karlsson. And then this is her website. And then the next couple of slides will be sample artworks. We begin with this piece. Can you share a bit about this artwork, Julie?
Yes. Okay. So that today we do so many things where we upcycle, where we reuse, we recycle. It's sort of in the environmentally conscious spirit of things. I don't know about you guys, but I have some really icky watercolors. It probably never happens to you guys that you have a watercolor that doesn't turn out really great, but I have a whole pile of them. One of the things that I think is so cool is that you can upcycle. You can hide those ugly things. You can brush a coat of the black watercolor ground on. Let's see, where are we looking here? There. And you can get a whole new start. You can do something new. So this was a really ugly watercolor that I covered with a coat of the black, it's called Mars Black watercolor ground. And then I went in with the iridescent paints. And let's see, if you can see at the bottom under the fish, you see it's got kind of an odd shape to it. Let me see, I might even, let me see what I got. I do. I have it right here.
Excuse me, Judy. We cannot, Julie. We can hardly hear you.
Okay, sorry. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Here I've got it as well. If you see down here, the different shapes that I got, it's sort of a seaweed effect. I got that by putting plastic wrap on the iridescent paints. And it turned out really cool, actually. It gave some really, really fun shapes and really fun texture to it. Then I tried salting the paint as well and got some very unexpected little bubbles. I've been told that fish don't actually blow bubbles out of their mouth, but this one does. Okay. Do you want to go back to the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Thanks.
There you go.
That's a fish my husband caught, actually. And that's similar to what I'm going to be doing tonight. I have a lot of fun. I love newsprint. And so I first used the transparent watercolor ground to collage down the newsprint. And then when that had cured, you can use a hairdryer actually and get it to dry really fast, but it does do a little bit better if you let it dry overnight. Then I went in and I painted the shape of the fish with the black ground, and that's what I'm going to be doing tonight. I went in after it had dried with the luminescent paints. I'm going to take the next one. I think the thing that really got me interested, first of all, in using the luminescent paints is the view out of my window. We have a beautiful lake here in Jönköping where we live. And at night, as the lights go out all around, as the sun goes out, the lights come on across the other side of the lake. And I love the glow of the sunset. We've got a gorgeous sunrise out our window as well. And that just challenged me to try and use the luminescent paints to create night scenes, which has been really, really fun. And let me tell you, we have a lot of night in Sweden during the winter. In the summer, we lose the stars for a few months, but when they come back, then it's nighttime a lot. And it really is fun to be able to do something with that. I keep saying I'm going to get in my car some evening and go park somewhere, sit in my car and paint night. And I think I'm going to do it sometime. I've got to find a friend who's crazy enough to go out in the middle of the night and sit in my car with me. But there's so many cool lights that show up at night, which is really, really fun. Okay, you want to take the next one? There I used the transparent and the white water. Okay, I'm understanding that my voice isn't coming across very well, is that right?
Yes, at points it isn't.
Okay, let me see if I can change something here. Let me see if I can change which microphone I'm using. Give me 2 seconds here and I'll see if I can get the other one going.
Pam from California says, hello, I love your work. And Margaret would like to try these, all these colors that you're presenting.
Yes, in the Facebook, there's lots of people wanting to try the iridescents after you've been talking about them.
Julie,
can you please unmute your microphone from your phone camera?
okay, so if
Okay,
it's the
let's
phone,
try
there,
this one. Can you hear me now?
we do, but it's picking up the audio from the laptop.
Okay,
I think
hang
you're
on.
going to switch to audio from your iPhone, right?
Right, that's what I'm working on.
Okay, so I'm going to click unmute for the iPod.
So Larry, you asked a question about taking photography with luminescent. And you're correct, it's pretty difficult because they're so reflective and refractive. I don't know, the only way around that is, I don't know a good way around that because there's going to be so much light coming back. You put light on it, you're going to get such a high amount of light coming back. Makes them a little bit difficult for photography.
John,
Yes,
could I offer a solution in that sense?
sure.
If the person who's taking a photo knows how to do it, maybe underexposing the image when they're taking the photo, and then in post-production of the photo digitally, upping the exposure level will bring it back to a more normal level, and you don't get as much light shininess.
Okay, thank you.
Ian, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
I don't like sports photography.
Yeah.
Julie, we
Do
can,
they not scan well? Can you skip the photograph and scan them directly? Is that possible?
we're not hearing you, Julie. I think we can stay with the original setting of your audio. It's only when
Okay.
you turn, it's okay now, Julie.
Is it okay?
Yeah, because after the slides, it's gonna be your demo. So we are picking up audio direct onto, it's the laptop that will pick up your audio. It's only when you turn to the right or turn your back, you try to move slightly away from the camera, from the laptop, that we lost sound.
Okay.
But I think this is okay. Okay, so we carry on with the next image.
Okay.
This one?
This one, go back one.
Okay, sure.
Are
Yeah.
you hearing my voice twice?
No, you're fine.
Okay, good. This one was really fun, actually. The transparent watercolor ground, or even the white ground, is really, really good for putting on things like gauze. I love using gauze, or you can even use tissue paper or some sort of really thin paper, and you can make really great, different kinds of structures, different kind of features with it. And if you put it on there, leave it on, and then add regular watercolor on top of that, it really absorbs it in a neat way. Okay, now we can go to the next one.
Julie,
Yes.
is that how you created the cross hatching?
Yes, that's exactly right. It was gauze.
This material is exactly which one? What is it
It's
called?
gauze, or it's cheesecloth. It's really loose weave. Let's see, can you see if I show it here? Let's see.
For bandages, Angela, for bandages they're used.
Exactly, for bandages or for making cheese.
Ah, yes. Thank you.
And you can, it's really formable. It's really nice that way. You can really form it and get all sorts of fun different shapes out of it.
Julie, do you leave it on the painting?
Yes. So I actually use the watercolor ground, either the transparent one or else the white, and it collages it down, it glues it down.
Right. Thank you.
So interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Angela, it's a little bit like using cellophane on your paper.
It is, except I leave it on. You're right. It makes a structure on it.
Great. Thank you.
The photo that you can see now, there were no flowers in the foreground. It just looked kind of dead. I loved using all the colors that are very, very granulating. The hematite in there was really fun to use, but I felt like I needed something else in the foreground. So I used some of the white watercolor ground, and all of a sudden I could put in flowers. So it gives you a second chance. About 200 years ago, when I was young and learned to use a typewriter instead of a computer, we had something called Opaque, which many of you have probably never seen, but it gave you a second chance. You could white out something and retype it. And it's sort of the same effect you can get with the white watercolor ground. It gives you a whole different chance to go in and put something else in your painting.
So useful.
This one, I have to say the coffee cup that's on top of the books was not in the original painting. Oh, thank you, Catherine. Yes, it was 200 years ago we used Tipex. The coffee cup on top of the books was not originally in the painting. I did this as a demo, and I thought I'd do something else with it after that. My mother had some really fun china cups, and for me, that's a good reminder of my mom. So I thought for Mother's Day one time, I thought I'd use this and put her china cup on there, filled with coffee, of course, like it always was. So I could paint with the white watercolor ground. And that allowed me to put a cup suddenly into my painting. It gives you a lot more options with a watercolor than you've ever had before. And this is one that I did without the luminescence, but I used sandpaper on it. In order to get that white structure on top of the rusty handles and the rusty part of the scissors and the wood grain in the background, I used some sandpaper over the finished painting. And it's really fun to be able to bring out some structure in the paper that way too. But again, the paints are fantastic. The iron oxides that look really, really rusty. It's 300-pound paper that I was using, and it's a very rough structure.
Now that's the end of the slide, Julie. Okay. So we can now go back to the regular frames.
I have one more thing I'd like to show you here. Someday I'm going to put these together. I have 3 small paintings that I've worked on, and using the iridescence in the background to create kind of a hazy pinky color. I've used the transparent ground here, and I actually used paper towel without any print on it, any color on it. And I use that also to create the birds. So there's structure all over. The wood structure, the branches or the fence here. We have these great fences in Sweden that look like this. And it makes such a great structure. You can just actually feel it. So when I frame it, I'm not going to put it behind glass. I'm actually going to just use acrylic sealant and spray over that so that you can feel the structure. I love the tactile effect of that, that the ground is possible. Okay, now let's get painting. So one of the things that I think is really important when you use the grounds is that you do a paint out, because they don't look the same way on black as they do on white, as you can see. And you need to be able to see what you're working with. So I have my palette here, and I have painted a little bit of the black watercolor ground so I can put my paints on that. I've also put a little bit of the black watercolor grounds on each of the sections in my palette so that I can also see the shift. It really helps when you're going to mix up the paints. Also, it seems to me, John, I may be wrong, but it seems to me that there's a lot of the binder in the luminescent paints. They seem to have a lot of the gum arabic. Is that right?
There's actually as much gum arabic as there is in the other paints. The difference that you're seeing is that it's so loaded with mica, which are like shingles on top of your house. They pack so tightly, they will push any free gum arabic to the top, and then you can just discard that. Whereas other particles of pigment do not do that. The mica packs really, really tight.
Okay, that explains it. I also find that when I'm not taking it directly out of the tubes, it takes a little bit of time to reactivate the paint.
Same thing is because the mica lays down like shingles on a house, and you have to wake them up a little bit. So if you squirted them with water and waited 10 or 15 seconds to let those particles come apart. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that it does. It really makes a difference if you activate it. Also, when I'm going to use them, I can also take a sponge and wet it, put it in the middle of my palette, and let it go to sleep for a little while. And when I wake it up, it's ready to go.
Yeah.
So I find that really helpful too.
So Julie, one thing I'm noticing is I have the same thing happen. I think you might be using your iPhone and the speaker's on the very bottom of it. So when your head goes down, it doesn't catch it. And when you're kind of looking at it, it's perfect.
Okay.
Like right
I'll
now,
keep working
perfect.
on that. Good, thank you. So I am going to put my palette on the side here. The painting that I'm going to work on tonight, I got started on already so that it would be easier to show you what I'm doing. I'm going to be using the transparent ground, and I'm going to be just finishing off the rest of the newsprint. I have a fascination with newsprint. I'm really sad that we don't have so many newspapers anymore. So much is on the phone these days. And it just really makes me sad that I don't have as much newsprint around me, because I think it's a really fun thing to use. So when I use it, I will clip out different pieces, and I'll put my water over here so you can see. If I put it there, I'll actually dip the paper in water, take off the excess, and it's just so it's not work with it. Because if I collage down the paper otherwise, it will often buckle. I'm sure some of you have tried things with wet glue and things like that, and you end up with buckled paper. So if you wet it first, then you're not going to have that issue. So here I'm going in, and I'm going to put some of the transparent watercolor ground on. I often add my newspaper going different directions, but I think it's kind of fun. So that's going different directions, and you don't just reading it. You can watch what you're doing instead. Just a little bit more. And here comes the last piece here. I'm not going to bother with the last little bit right now. I'll do that later. But just to show you how that works, it sticks down really, really nicely. Don't water down the ground at all. Just use it directly from the jar, and it works very, very well. It actually kind of seals the surface so that it becomes very watercolor friendly. Then what I've done here, you can see that I've covered this one with black watercolor ground. I've let it dry overnight. I have one more here that I put in that I'm going to start working on. We'll see if I finish painting him or not. So again, take it directly out of the jar. And it covers quite well. Sometimes I'll take an extra swing at it and cover it twice. I'll let it dry for about a half an hour. And then I'll go in one more time, especially when I've collaged in the newsprint underneath. It helps me get rid of the seams, and it gives me a much nicer surface. So when I go in like this, it's just really creamy, really easy to work with. And it smooths out really, really nicely.
Julie, in your experience with the watercolor grounds, have you ever tinted the white?
I have. Actually, I've done it by mistake. Sometimes I've
So we can't hear you, Julie.
and I've got also used the one that's half titanium. That creates a really nice old-fashioned look. Is there anybody else that has tinted it? I'd be really interested to know what ways that you
Julie,
probably
we
use it.
couldn't hear your reply. There was
No,
no
I'm
sound.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We
Okay.
couldn't hear you.
I have tinted it before, actually by accident.
Julie, I think you'd have
Yes.
to, is it okay for you to move closer to the laptop? Because the laptop is picking up your sound. Yeah, closer.
Okay,
Yeah, that's
is this
better.
better?
Yes.
Okay,
Or if you have a headset, perhaps you could use the headset for your microphone.
I don't actually right now.
Okay.
I don't have a plug-in on this one.
It's working now, Julie.
Now,
Is it working
now
okay?
It's better.
It's working
the
now,
sound
yeah.
is much better. Yes, thank you.
Okay, good. I've actually tinted it by accident. I had a paintbrush that had some residual paint in it. And I ended up tinting it from white to blue. was actually quite nice. I'd be really interested though to know how other people have used it, if you've tinted it or what you've done as well.
So you can tint it up to 10%. You can use watercolor to tint it up to 10%. You can also wet it by 10% to have it be smoother. There was also another question about what would a fixative on top of it do to the iridescent. What I have noticed when we have done it is you will lose a lot, if not all of the luminescent quality if you put some type of fixative on top, because you're coating that reflective or refractive quality.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I've done it on a couple things. I'm gonna have to try it again and see. It may depend maybe on which ones I'm using. Could that be possible?
You know, I think it's like everything else. If it works, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's all, you know, it's always trial. So if you're getting good results with it, that's fantastic.
Yeah, so far I think I've been fairly satisfied with it. I haven't noticed anything else anyway. So yeah.
Julie,
I don't put on a super heavy coat. I often use a spray and I'll do it quite lightly. Okay, so here are my fish that I'm using. And I'm gonna go ahead, move my palette over here. I also have a little paint out here that I can see. I've done a few mixes of the different iridescent paints as well. You can get some really interesting secondary colors here. One of the things that you can do too is you can kind of sketch with the paints. It's really, really nice because the ground actually makes it so that you can take away paint. So if you don't get it quite where you want it, you got a second chance. So I can sketch a little bit here. And then I'm going to be able to move that around if I want to. I think it's going to be okay, but it gives me a second chance. So when I go in, I paint with it probably thicker than I would with regular watercolor paint, just so that it shows up more. I feel like when I paint with this, it's not at all the way I generally paint with watercolor. It's more, I would say it's kind of like a combination of watercolor and acrylic, almost, the way that I often use it. So once I've gone in and gotten the basic feel of where my fish is, then I'm going to want to go in and give it that rounded feel. I can go in, I've got pearlescent white here. The one I was using now is iridescent russet. I really like russet. It's a great color. So I work very, very dry. I use a small paintbrush and I work quite dryly compared to the way I'd normally paint with the watercolors. I'm used to using a lot more color. I'm used to using a lot more washes that are very, very wet and juicy. When I do this, I go in quite a bit drier. Another thing you can do on the black ground is you can use titanium white quite well.
We had a question on Facebook from Sandra Ball asking if you stretch the watercolor paper underneath the ground and collage that you're using.
I actually just put it down on, I have a masonite board underneath, a thick board, and I used masking tape And once I've collaged this down, it feels like it buckles a little bit. If I leave it overnight, it usually settles down really, really well.
Previous on Facebook, we also had another question. If you were concerned about the longevity and the acidity of your newsprint damaging the archival quality of your paper.
I've tested some, and I've had some for probably about 15 years that I've had out in the light to see what would happen. And I think I've tried it with different things. Back then it was yellowing. With the transparent watercolor ground, I've got something that, John, I don't know when you started it. Was it 10 years ago, maybe?
About 10 years ago, yes.
Yeah. And so far they've stayed really, really nice and white. But I feel like if it would yellow, it would just kind of be part of the process. I think I could live with that going yellow because it won't affect the paint either. But so far I've had really good luck with it. And I don't know, John, you could explain better, but I think that the transparent watercolor ground on top of the newsprint, does that help with as like a UV?
So it does. The lignin that you would have in any type of a wood product, the acidity part, wouldn't go through the watercolor ground. So the watercolor ground, whatever is on top of it, is not going to have that issue. You can't, however, stop, the paper itself. So any part that can have that issue. But if it's on top of the watercolor ground, that's going to create a barrier.
Yeah, I think so far I've been really fortunate anyway. You can see I'm using a little bit of titanium white and it just makes it pop.
Julie,
Yes.
sorry. What do you call this kind of art? Is it like serial collage?
I think I would just call it a mixed media. It feels like just a really fun way of combining watercolor with a few other things.
That's good, that, because a lot of people who do mixed media tend towards acrylic.
Yeah.
Shy away from watercolor. So if you can get people excited about doing mixed media with watercolor, that's great.
Exactly. I've got a class actually here the first weekend in May, and it's mixed media that's watercolor based. And we'll be starting out with some of the grounds. We'll be going into old watercolors and fixing those a bit. It's really, really fun to see what people can do when they get the chance to redo a watercolor or add something to it. And I think the grounds really enable you to do a lot more with watercolor that way. So here I've got antique, iridescent antique copper. That for me was a new acquaintance recently. I really like the color of that. One of the things here, like I was saying, you can take away paint. So here I've sketched a little bit in the iridescent russet, and I can go in with water over that and pretty much take that off. So it's really forgiving. The other one of the colors I really like is iridescent blue silver. That just makes some really gorgeous shine here.
Julie, may I ask a question?
Yes.
What colors have you used so far?
So far I've used iridescent russet. I've used iridescent antique copper, iridescent sunstone. Oh, actually, I can show you here. Okay, so iridescent russet, iridescent sunstone, iridescent antique copper, pearlescent white, and I have a little bit of titanium white. And now I'm working with the iridescent blue silver.
We actually
Thank you
have
so
this,
much.
Julie, we have this swatch sent to the our guests in Zoom. We sent a
Oh,
file.
great. Perfect. I also posted it on my Instagram account today,
Oh, excuse me.
so you can find it on my Instagram account as well. One of the things that I really like here is going in and mixing. If I give it a little bit of this blue silvery look, I'm going to try and speed things up here. Just so I get a base to work on. It also helps me with the direction of the scales. I want to have that rounded feel here. Then I can start going in and adding a few more things. For example, I've got iridescent gold. The golds are really fun. This one is iridescent gold. The goldstone is slightly warmer, a little more orangey. The sunstone is somewhere in between it. And then we've got interference gold, which is one of my absolute favorites. It's pretty much invisible on white paper, but it really is gorgeous on a dark surface. That's one of the ones I use often when I'm painting outside scenes at night.
Julie,
Yes.
a couple of questions. How do you find these paints interact with what you would call normal paint?
They're a little unexpected sometimes. Sometimes when you mix them up, they don't always, you don't always get a homogeneous mix. They kind of separate at times, but they work really, really well. Other ones mix together super, super well. But I think they give your regular paints, your normal paints, just a little something special.
Yeah. Forgot my other question.
So I think you definitely should do a color swatch. Use all of your regular paints and mix something iridescent into it and see what happens, or something luminescent.
Julie,
Yes.
I'm Kathleen McElwain. I am amazed at how quickly you can cover these, like the silver with another color, the copper that you did at the bottom of the fish. So is that really dry?
Yeah, it dries really fast, actually.
This would be so much fun to teach.
It is. It just creates a whole different possibility. It feels like it's a whole new genre of painting. It's, like I said, it's somewhere between watercolor and acrylics, kind of. Gives you the benefits of both.
Julie?
Yes.
I've remembered my question.
Okay.
You've tried it on white paper.
Yes.
And you tried it on black. Have you
Yes.
ever had a look at it in a 50% grey paper to see what that?
I haven't. That's a really good idea.
You know, something that's bang in the middle to see what you
That
can
would
push
be
one way or the other.
One of the things I have done is when I love doing like a monochrome kind of a painting, and I don't know if you can see it. I've used the sapphire, the iridescent sapphire in with my blue here, and it just kind of gives the water, it feels like it moves. So there it's more of a half tone, I think. So I've used some of the iridescent sapphire, and I used a little bit of the duochrome blue pearl in there. So it gives it some of the effect, but not as much as if it was on black.
Yeah.
I've also put in a few lights on the horizon over here on the other side of the lake. And those are also in luminescence as well.
Right, thank
I
you.
don't know. I don't think you can see the shimmer. I'm so sorry. You're just gonna have to try it for yourself.
Mhm.
Here's another effect. It was also kind of a half tone. I put in some lights in the window. And when I move it around anyway, it changes. You can see it more at certain angles than others.
So once you've got a base color down, it will either shimmer more or less according to what base is on it
Yes,
underneath.
that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
Another thing that's really nice, you can actually go in and touch up things with you can touch it with the watercolor ground, but you can also use lamp black. Lamp black is very opaque and it works very, very well together with this if you want to go in and change something. Sometimes you want to have more of a shift than you're getting, and it's a really good way to be able to do that. Here, for example, I'd like to have a little bit darker effect right here at the front of this little fin. And either I can go in, I can take that out, or I could go in with a little bit of lamp black, or I could go in with more of my Mars black ground. I like the green tones as well. It's really funny, the colors that I might not gravitate towards in my regular palette with my other colors, I really like in these luminescent paints. This one is duochrome emerald. And it's a color that my painters laugh at me. I would call it an icky green. It's a really bright, bright green. It's a very vibrant green. But when you put it on here, it just really works well to make the fish shimmer. Another one of the ones that I think is so much fun is iridescent scarab red, which looks like this on black. It goes green. So when I go in and I paint that, it gives me a gorgeous deep color of green there. And when I paint it over the gold, I get a slight red shift to it. So when I go over here, it's a little bit redder. And when I do it next to that, just on the black, it goes totally green. I love that color. It's a great one. So when I go over the pearlescent white, it also goes back to the red.
Bella is asking if these iridescent colors, if they are considered watercolor or mixed medium.
They're actually watercolors. You can thin them out totally, but the way you can use them lends itself really well to mixed media, I would say. But it is watercolor. It's real watercolor.
Great, thank you.
It's starting to look absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you. It's fun. It's just really, really fun. I've told John before, but I think he should put warning signs on his paints. They're totally addictive.
What have you used as the base below your newspaper? What have you mounted your newspaper on?
I had 300-pound watercolor paper.
Okay.
This is another thing about upcycling. Sometimes I've bought paper that has been more like blotter paper than watercolor. Have you ever had that happen where you buy paper and it ages.
Mm.
And something about the glue or the gelatin or whatever it is that they use, it gets old. And all of a sudden, it just looks more like blotter paper than watercolor paper. And I live in a part of Sweden that's known for being thrifty. I won't throw things away. I insist on trying to find some way to use them. And it's a great way to be able to use that watercolor paper that isn't any fun to use anymore.
That's a wonderful idea.
Julie, there is a spray which preserves the paper and turn it into pH neutral.
Ooh, I like that. What's it called?
You know, I cannot say it just like that. I forgot a long time ago because I used to paint a lot of newspapers, which are very have a lot of acidity.
Acidic, yeah.
Yeah, and I found that spray, but I haven't used it for a long time and I forgot. I have to research it and find it again, but it exists.
That is wonderful. That sounds even better.
Yeah,
Is there
because
anybody else out there that might have an idea about it?
it does yellow and it does get brittle, and after a few years it will disintegrate.
Yeah, it does. I do think the transparent watercolor ground helps to keep it together a little bit. But
Could be,
anything
yes.
that would help make it go neutral would be great.
With your watercolor papers that lost their sizing, I've read, and maybe John can confirm if this is acceptable for archival or not. I've read that you can create your own sizing using gelatin and repaint it onto your paper and let it dry.
Ooh, that sounds really
There you
interesting.
can.
That would be great. I'm gonna have to try that. What kind of gelatin would you use?
Normal gelatin.
You use gelatin like you're making Jell-O from scratch, so unflavored, no sugar, no flavor. And I think the dilution was you diluted it 10 times extra with water. But again, John, who has training in chemistry, would know if that's useful or not.
Yeah, I'm not
What do you
sure
say,
about that
John?
with paper. I can ask one of the paper manufacturers about that.
That would be
There
really
are
interesting.
sorry. There
Why
are
does it go
better
bad? Does
chemicals.
the gelatin just get old?
Historically, that's what we used to size the paper, from what I understand. If
Mm.
anybody else wants to speak to that.
But I wonder if
Yeah,
it
I do think it ages and it becomes brittle also, the gelatin.
yeah.
And the yellowing the paper is not bad. I like that, the feeling and the look of it, but it disintegrates. That is what is the disturbing part of
Yeah,
it.
that's not good.
So then it destroys the archival quality of your high quality cotton papers.
Yeah.
That's your experience, Stella?
Yes, and it will disintegrate. It will become brittle and it will start peeling.
No, that's not.
So if your paper's archival to start with, if it's truly archival to start with, it's going to remain archival.
Mm.
So
Yes.
archival is archival. If it's acidic, if it's newspaper, if it's board, it's going to have lignin, and as that changes over time, that's going to become more acidic.
Yes.
But the paper, so sizing really, when you think about it, sizing doesn't really have a huge amount to do with whether something's archival or not. It's only for the penetration of water. That's what it's for. Sizing, whether it's internal or external, is going to either increase or slow the rate of water from the top of the paper through the bottom of the paper. That's what sizing does. It does nothing for the archival part. That is how they process their cotton, etc., their pulp. And if it's archival to begin with, it's archival at the end. The gelatin, as you're saying, probably can break down, and that would allow more water to go through faster. In fact, you would see if you turn the paper over, you can see where sizing has failed. You can see spots, and that's where the sizing has failed. But that doesn't really have anything to do with the archival quality.
Yeah,
So
absolutely
that's really
right.
good to know.
different things.
Yeah, that is absolutely right, John. It's just that spray that kills the acidity in archives, the newspaper that exists.
Cool.
That sounds really interesting. I'm gonna have to look into that.
Yeah,
So
I'm
you
going
are
to research it also.
You are correct, Julie. That's what spun off the conversation was you felt there was a part of the paper that the sizing was off. And if you find that on a paper, yes, you can apply some of this transparent ground and still work on that wonderful archival paper. You know, I would rather like put some of the transparent sizing than, you know, get back to the distributor and say they need to replace this one sheet out of 20, you know, reams of paper. And so
Yeah, I've actually even bought a brand new pad of watercolor paper, and it was bad. And I know what I've read, if it gets too humid, or if it gets too dry, or if you've had it at the beach with you in salt water, it can also affect that.
I think it becomes mixed media painting. By
Generally,
then.
environmental things like changes in heat where you store your paper can create micro cracks in your top layer of sizing, and that's what tends to cause that most of the time.
Okay.
But another thing that you can use, which is a bit weird that I found out about, paper manufacturers use specialized sizings that are special chemicals, but in an emergency, if you've got some spaghetti, you know, at the bottom of your spaghetti, there's all that jelly stuff.
You mean the starch?
Starch can be modified, and that's something else that can be used to make sizing, and it's better than gelatin because it's a stronger bond.
It's like wallpaper paste then?
Yeah, you can use that in some cases as well.
I don't know,
Although,
what would wallpaper, John, do you have any ideas about what wallpaper paste does as far as the if it's acid or not?
You know,
I mean, these are only man-made fixers.
Yeah.
No, they're not professional fixers.
I would be really careful about bugs eating my work if I had started.
I tell you what, if it had any spaghetti on it, I'd be careful about me eating it.
My painters and I joke about the times that we've painted with coffee, that if we ever end up in a world coffee crisis, we'll just unframe our coffee paintings and lick them.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to drink sizing, but I noticed one thing, you're painting direct, you're not mixing on the palette, so you're mixing on your actual painting. Is that what you typically do?
No, I often, well, when I paint with normal paints, not with the luminescence, I would do a lot of mixing on my palette. And I would also do a lot of wet washes and let the paint play with each other in that. So in this way, I paint very, very differently from the way I normally paint. But here I definitely mix it more layer on layer.
Now, this technique, are you putting warms and cools next to each other? Like,
Exactly.
you're getting a roundness to the fish.
Right. I want it to sparkle and shine here. I'm thinking if the light looks like it's hitting it here with the warmer colors, then it'll hopefully feel like it's a little bit rounded there. And then I love these warms too. I think they're just so great. They command so much attention.
Since your husband caught these fish, does he cook them or do you cook them?
I actually, well, we're kind of a team effort. He's really great that way. We actually filleted them and then he ground it up for me. And we made these amazing fish patties. They were very tasty.
Can you tell us what kind of fish they are?
It's actually called, now let me think, roach. It sounds horrible. It's called roach in English. Like, you know, the little bugs that go running across your kitchen?
Yes,
Yeah, they're called roach.
thanks.
Mhm.
Oh.
So it's like a carp.
Yeah, it is. It's a type of carp. It's in the carp family. My father was a fisheries biologist. So my life has revolved around salmon spawn. We had a creek with spawning salmon when I was growing up. So we would sit at the breakfast table and check the salmon that were spawning outside in the creek. We ate our breakfast. The fish have made a big impression on me my whole life. I can't say that I'm knowledgeable enough to actually make them look the way they should look, but this is my interpretation of a carp.
It's also a very good subject for surrealism.
Yeah, yeah, it's really a good thing that way. You can do all sorts of fun stuff with it. This also works really well for insects. We've also got an insect biologist in our family. And doing beetles, you know, you've got that scarab red. I mean, that's inspired by beetles, right? Yeah, so you can do really great beetles. You can do butterflies. Bees are great. The wings on bees are so much fun. So there are a lot of things. Butterflies. I did a butterfly for my mother one time. It was a very small one, so it was about real size. And she had it up and somebody came in, they said, "Oh, where did you get the butterfly?" And she said, "Oh, my daughter made it." She says, "Yeah, but where did you catch it?" They look, with the iridescent qualities, they just look real.
Very cool.
Now, will you maybe possibly spritz this? You know, I noticed reading your questionnaire, you maybe come back to paintings, you don't finish it in one go. What do you do when you come back? Do you paint on the dry surface or do you spritz it? How do you get started again once you've been away from this painting?
This one will probably just go straight into the dry paint. I've got my blackfish over here. That'll do better if I let it dry overnight and go into it tomorrow. So I'll just start up again. The only thing I really have to work on is reactivating my paint. So then I need to spritz them with water, give them a little time to reactivate, and then I can get going again.
What you'll have to do is paint some chips with it, and then it's fish and chips in paper.
Oh, there we go. That would be great. I love fish and chips. That's going to have to be a new project.
Julie, this is Alison here.
Yes.
And I'm loving this fish. It's looking so three-dimensional. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
My
Nice to talk with you.
You too. I told you I was looking forward to meeting you.
Yes.
Daughter's also looking at it and she's saying, "Mom, that's just the kind of thing that I'd like to do." So,
oh, fun. Yeah, let me just encourage you, do it. Get a bunch of the luminescent paints and
yes,
just
I
have fun.
Yes.
The sky's the limit.
He particularly liked your idea of working on newspaper because to the younger generation, that's very funky and happening.
Yeah, exactly.
He's loving that aspect about it.
Thank you.
It's looking so three-dimensional. It looks like you can just pick it up off the paper.
Yeah, here it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
It is. It's just really, really fun. I think I've got to say that that's one of the things with the luminescent paints is they're fun. I have to say, John, that once I got introduced to the watercolor paints, both the ones that granulate, all the neat mixes, but the Primitex, I absolutely love the Primitex and the luminescence, and the ones like Moon Glow, Undersea Green, the ones that do something magical. I think that's really when my adventure in watercolor started. I've painted watercolor for years before that, but it's been a whole lot more fun since.
And it
What
suits
I
your
was saying
personality too.
before we started here, one of the things I think you probably all would agree with is that John and Catherine have created a watercolor community around the world when we can meet up like this. And I just appreciate that so much. It's so fun to get connected in different ways.
Julie, one of our questions we always ask artists is, when will you know that this fish is cooked? I mean, when will you know when this fish is done or a painting is done?
No, that's a really good question. I'll probably take a look at it tomorrow. I often find that if I see it in a dim light, like if I don't turn the lights on at home and I come into the room and I see it in a different light, then I can see it a little bit more objectively. And that will probably tell me if I need a little bit more, a little more contrast, a little more color, or if I'm done. And then another thing to me that is usually a sign that I'm done is I put in the shadows. I don't know if you can see on this one here, I've put in a bit of a shadow. I honestly don't think I've done a painting in recent years without Payne's Blue Gray. John, it's my absolute favorite. And a little bit of cobalt. Those two colors end up in nearly everything I paint. And so that's usually when I put in the Payne's Blue Gray and the cobalt in the shadows, then I'm done.
We have another common question that we ask. Do you have a pet that keeps you company in the studio?
No, I actually don't. I usually put on music and keep going with that. I hope that the spiders that are down in my studio, because there are some of those, I hope that they don't get too friendly. I do have to clean them up once in a while. So I'm trying not to have pets in the studio. See how I'm taking off the paint here? So I love it because you can add and you can subtract.
Julie,
Yes.
are there any collage artists that you draw inspiration from?
One more time, any?
Collage artists that
Oh,
you draw inspiration from?
you know, I love Instagram. I think it's so much fun. There are some really great collage artists, and I'm going to murder names if I say them, and I know I'll get them wrong. But I have seen a few of them on Instagram that are so much fun. So yeah, I would say that there are several of them. Another thing that I think is really fun is airport art. It sounds really funny, but as I fly through airports, there's a lot more art there than I ever realized. I got stuck in an airport for quite a bit of time one time, and I realized that there were all these really neat collages that were made with bits of tile, bits of glass, I don't know what all, but they were gorgeous. And I think it just kind of made me, as I was really bored at the airport, it made me stop and think about what you could do with more collage.
Yeah.
Julie, when you're done, would you post your finished work?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
That'd be fantastic. And I've had questions about whether you would come back again and use other colors. And just so you know, we're going to invite all the brand ambassadors back and all the artists that have been in the studio back to do more, because I think you'll have more questions for them. So with that, before we say goodbye, does anybody have a last question for Julie?
May I give a comment?
Yeah.
You were commenting about the glass collages you were enjoying in the airports. And I wanted to encourage you with the watercolor grounds that John has developed. We can put the watercolor grounds on glass so that we can combine now both.
Yeah. I did a really fun, at Christmas time, I did a really fun glass. It was for the store here in town just to see what would happen. And you're right, it can make really fun things. The grounds just create so many new possibilities.
Julie, how do you frame your paintings, the ones on the newspaper?
If I'm put it behind glass, I think I'll just put probably a white or even a black
Right.
piece of matting around it. And then I am married to an amazing man who makes most of my frames or cuts them and puts them together. So he's spoiled me so much. He'll help me put it all together. If I was going to do something with more structure, like the tree with the gauze, then I think I'd frame it without matting and just spray it with a little bit of some kind of a fixative.
Julie,
you.
do you talk to these fish in Swedish when you're painting?
Absolut, och de svarar mig också.
Very nice. When I go fishing, I drop a line, and that's so good. Thank you.
Thank you.
This
Thank you.
it was
So much
really
fun.
fun. Thank you for all your questions. I really appreciate that. I know that Jean Haynes has a series of the small 5 milliliter tubes. A really great way to get a hold of some of the luminescence if you don't want to invest in big tubes. Go for it. Put it on your Christmas wish list, put it on your birthday wish list, and let everybody you know that you want some paint.
Julie,
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I love your
you.
pets.
Great.
Thank
We
you
enjoyed
very
it a
much.
lot.
You're all very kind.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks for spending some time with me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank